Crusader Kings 3 has a number of government types at your disposal as you build your medieval empire across the map. From the rigid clan system that relies on vassal opinion, the prototypical feudal systems of Europe, to the tribal warlords that dot the map, understanding each of the three governments is crucial in executing your own campaign within one of these governments or having them within your own territory as a vassal. In this video today, I'm going to go over clan, tribal, and feudal governments. In that order, actually. We'll be discussing the differences between each one, how taxes, levies, control, and vassals shake out across each governmental style, and the importance of things such as feudal contracts. I had originally intended to make a video on converting a tribal faction to feudal, but I figured that it's important to understand everything about what makes all three of these governments different before we can dive deeper on any specific one. So if you're looking for that video, I promise it's coming, and I do have some tips for you at the end of the tribal section on that subject matter. But if you'd like to jump ahead, you'll be able to find the corresponding chapters for each government in the timeline below. And as always, if you decide to pick the game up after watching this, please feel free to use my link in the description. You'll simply receive a Steam key that you'll go ahead and place directly into Steam, but I also get a lovely commission. And as of the creation of this video, there's a 12% discount going on until October 1st. But let's get started on an overview of the governments in Crusader Kings 3. The first government type we're going to talk about is clan. And clan has a number of traits from both tribal and feudal, and so I think it makes the most sense to talk about them first. Also, feudal has a lot more complexity to it, so that's why it's at the very end. So taking a look here, we're going to talk about a number of things. So let's just start off with your vassals, because they are a huge driving portion of your economy. Now, the big thing with clan is that your vassals will provide you with more taxes and more levies based off of their opinion of you. Let's just look over at clan itself, the actual text for it. Clans are a government form in which the amount of levies and taxes given to a liege by their vassal is determined by their opinion of said liege. However, the liege's crown authority can increase the minimum amount they must provide regardless of opinion. So, before we actually jump down into the actual taxes and levies, looking at crown authority, which is the same thing for feudal, they're both called crown authority, you have this increasing number. So at limited crown authority, the vassals will provide at least 5% of levies and 2% of income. All the way to the top end, with absolute crown authority, clan government vassals will provide at least 25% of levies and 10% of income. So that is very strong, because as you'll find with the clan system, you're going to be constantly managing the opinion of your vassals to maximize the amount of levies and income you get. Because for every point above 0, you get 0.1% additional taxes and 0.305% additional levies. So let me go over to someone with 0 opinion of us. So the base amount at 0 opinion is 15%. If someone were to say have 95 opinion of us, which is the closest I've got to 100 right now, that's going to confer an additional 24% contribution. So having that max 100 opinion equals 10% more tax and 30.5% levies. Again, looking over at levies, that base contribution is 30% at 0 opinion. And then at 95, we would get 59%, which is that 30.5 that we'd be getting from the roughly 100 opinion here. Now, as you dip below opinion, which I don't think I have any strong negative on here. As you dip below, the amount, that base amount, goes to 0 for taxes and 10% for levies at around -50. So the reduction rate is 0.3% in taxes and 0.4% in levies below 0. So keeping it above 0 is so crucial with clans until you pass the amount of crown authorities you would need. So taking a look at this scale one more time, for a clan vassal, they'll provide you 25% of levies and 10% of income. So they'll always be, for the most part, at bare minimum, I think it's what, like minus 15 or something like that, minus 10, and they'll still at least provide 25% levies and 10% income. So you do have that at least going for you if you have the high crown authority. And it's also worth noting that crown authority for both feudal and for clan requires innovations. As you can see here, we don't have the innovation royal prerogative to get the absolute crown authority. With the tribal system, that's not the case. You can just jump up through tribal authority as you see fit. So your taxes and levy contribution is scaled directly off of your opinion, the vassal's opinion of you, and it's very important to keep that high. Now, in addition to that, you also get holdings. So if I were to scroll down here, we'll take a look over here. This location has individual holdings. It's got a castle holding, a temple holding, a city holding that you can then increase your production and your taxes and your levies and all of your benefits, just like you would normally with a feudal kingdom by producing buildings here. You do not get this in the conventional way with tribal, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and you can't make these additional holdings as well. So being able to increase these gives you that kind of sense of the feudal system that you might be familiar with if you've been playing a Western European faction that does have feudal. Now, in addition to, we also have a special casus belli. Now, let me bring up this. We'll go to wars. They have what's called the conquest casus belli, and that can be done on the county level for conquering a specific county. And if you didn't know this, you can press change objective to choose a different county within this location, or a specific duchy within a specific location here. Choose other one, or the kingdom. So you can invade the entire kingdom title of this location here. So there's that location. I'm trying to take it all out. We're invading the kingdom, and you can only attempt one invasion war against a kingdom tier title per lifetime. So you really only want to use this in case unless you're absolutely dedicated to a large swath of land being included into your territory, or it's a kingdom you really need to maybe solidify an empire title, something of the sort, since you only can do it once per lifetime per character, obviously. So these things are really important when considering, how does clan really differ from tribal and how does tribal differ from feudal? Because with this a vassal opinion system, you don't worry about it as much in feudal system. With the feudal system, yeah, they can end up plotting against you and so on and so forth, but it doesn't directly affect the amount of taxes and levies you get because there's the feudal contract in place. Also, because you've got these holdings, you get more taxes and levies, something that the tribal system does not get. And one thing also to take note here too, is that the higher your crown authority, the more penalty that it's going to give you. So direct vassal opinion is minus 30. So you're constantly having to navigate around the vassal opinion as you push yourself higher up in the crown authority, which would, like I said earlier, guarantee you a minimum amount of levies and income, but you do have to worry about the hit to the vassal opinion that it's going to cause. So right here, it's going to absolute, we're going to get a minus to 30. So you do have to be mindful of these things. And if you yourself are a vassal in a clan system or clan government, then you will always contribute 10% of your taxes and 25% of your levies, no matter what your opinion of the liege is. So that's worth noting. And lastly, since we're on this subject, you do have republic vassals, and republic vassals you cannot change or influence. Republican government is an unplayable government form where an elected citizen rules for life, the government form of burghers and merchants. Republican vassals have static obligations that cannot be changed and thus always provide a dependable and predictable amount of levies and taxes. So what that amount is right here. Every republic vassal you have will always contribute 20% of its taxes to you, and it will contribute 10% of its levies to you, no matter what. So you don't really have to worry about having these guys affect your level of income and levies, but it was worth noting because some people might ask about Republic, and we'll probably get Republic as a form of government in some form of DLC or something of the sort. But that covers on a pretty high level the clan system, and now you have a better idea of how this operates. But really, I think a lot of people want to learn about the tribal system. So let's talk about tribal next and then wrap everything up with the feudal system because it's going to be a little bit more dense of a subject. Tribal governments are, I think, where a lot of people are getting hung up. They are very prevalent, especially if you're looking at the starting date of 867, and as you get into 1066, they can be a pretty big challenge because you're dealing with other holdings that have more garrisons, feudal kingdoms that can actually just bring more units to the table when it comes to defending their property on their own. But with tribal, there are a number of things that are different between a tribal, of course, and feudal. And we're going to kind of go over those right now. So looking over here at Courland, as we zone into the map, we can see that we are, again, my son is my new heir. We can see that we are a tribal faction. And what that means is development in owned counties is ignored. With control, or I'm sorry, with clans and with feudal, development is the same thing. It's going to contribute to your taxes, to your levies, and to your supply limit. But in tribal, development only adds to supply. It says that it's ignored, but it does add to your supply amount. Allows the raiding of foreign counties for loot, which is, again, exclusive to tribal, and tribal realms have stunted county development, cannot advance past the tribal era innovations, and cannot construct new holdings, and are usually unable to change their succession law. However, they can make use of prestige rather than gold to build their realms and hire men-at-arms, and have access to more casus belli compared to feudal realms. Non-tribal armies suffer a supply limit penalty in hostile tribal territory. So, it is pretty difficult to make the transition from tribal to feudal, and I'll go over that at the end of this section. But with both clan and with feudal, we have tribal authority. And this is different because, like I said before, it doesn't require any innovations to increase. If I jump over here to the innovations menu, let's go to early medieval. So royal prerogative is required for high crown authority law or absolute crown authority law. And as we look at other ones, divine right will actually give you special feudal contracts that we'll go into later. But there are portions of the early and the high medieval development that allows you to have higher and higher crown authority. But with tribal, you don't have to worry about that. You just simply progress up this as normal. But here's the big thing to note here. When you progress past a certain amount of crown authority with clan or with feudal, your vassals don't go to war with each other. That's not the case with tribal. They will continue to go to war with one another, and you really can't do a whole ton about it. Here's absolute tribal authority. Direct vassal opinion is -30, and independent tribal rulers may settle, becoming feudal or clan. From previous levels, though, titles can be revoked, vassals can be retracted, characters can be imprisoned, and tribal rulers with non-tribal lieges may settle, becoming feudal or clan. So, you can't really control how your vassals treat one another. They might just keep going to war with a tribal scenario. In fact, even in tribal succession, you might deal with something where you are, they offer you they challenge you to a duel for your domain. So you might actually lose your domain through an actual duel if you're not strong enough of a tribal leader. And all tribal factions are locked at Confederate partition, meaning that things are divided equally between your children, and new titles may be created for younger heirs. You can't go to partition because you have to have hereditary rule, which is part of being feudal. If you want hereditary rule, it's in the early medieval. It's right there. So you're locked into all of these tribal innovations, and you have to complete a certain percentage of them before you can even move into early medieval and become feudal. So that's a pretty big kind of, kicking the old balls, as they say. But there is a way around this. So if I were to click on this character here, and here's my primary title of the duchy of this location, click on that. There are laws. Now, specific tribal laws can be put into effect. Right now, I believe that we already have the law that is Scandinavian. Oh no, Scandinavian elective is right here. But there are 3 types of elective that are typically accessible within a lot of tribal duchies. Or, I'm sorry, tribal factions. Scandinavian elective, Tanistry elective, and Anglo-Saxon or Saxon elective. And it'll say here, if I click Scandinavian elective, it'll say you do not belong to a North Germanic culture group. You do not belong to Irish or Scottish culture groups, and the other one is for Anglo-Saxons. So you can kind of get around the issue with tribal elections in trying to use this process that could at least guarantee that you get a solid heir coming into your succession. But I wanted to bring this up because it's not part of the way they describe tribal in the game. They describe it as like, oh, you're locked in a Confederate partition. But if you were to start in 867 as Novgorod, they say, well, you can take Scandinavian elective. And from there, you don't really need to worry about the primary title as long as it has Scandinavian elective. So I wanted to bring that up, and a lot of people have brought this up in the comments, so it's worth bringing up at this point right now. But like we were talking about, development is going to be increasing the amount of taxes and whatnot you get. It just simply gives us supply limit. Development is ignored, except for its effect on the supply limit, because the owner of the county has a tribal government. And it's important to know that if you do progress past tribal and into feudal, all of your buildings are destroyed because you convert over to feudal. It's supposed to represent your infrastructure changing hands. It's pretty punishing. But in addition to that, if I jump over to military and create men-at-arms, well, men-at-arms are now created through prestige rather than gold, making their constant production and upkeep a little bit easier, because it's, I think, in my opinion, far easier to come across prestige as a tribal government than it is, say, if you're feudal or clan. So you have these men-at-arms that are paid for using your prestige. In addition to that, you get the ability to, I'm going to go ahead and go back to military, raise all raiders, and I can have these guys go to a location. You can, this little symbol means that they're raiders right there, the little torches above it. I can have them go to a location, let's just say right here. And if they successfully raid this, they'll gather 3 loot and usually a comparable amount of prestige. And this character, this army, as long as it makes it back to my border before it's attacked, it will deposit the total amount of money and prestige into my bank account. So let me just go ahead and do that. So my total amount of raid loot is 41, so I can't go above that. So it kind of limits how much raiding you can do. So I wanted to outline that real quick, because the other special thing that you get as tribal, and we talked about this a little bit with clan, is, go ahead and go to war here. I have some special abilities. We have the Conquest, Casus Belli, like we've talked about before, which allows us to conquer counties, duchies, or invade kingdoms. But we also get Subjugate. Now the big difference here is with a conquer, you gain the contested title, and you gain the contested title, and in this one you seize all titles within High Chieftain's realm belonging de jure to the target title, de jure to the target title, and all occupied counties outside of it. With this situation, he becomes my vassal, and it's easy, open shut case. With subjugate, I target all of his lands, and it's pretty potent, because you're pretty much just taking this guy entirely into your territory and making him your own. I think it's a really, really, really awesome way to use tribal here. You take High Chieftain's primary title and make him your vassal. You get High Chieftain, you gain 350 fame, your ally share, and then he becomes your vassal, spends and share, blah, 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 blah. But I think it's a really awesome way to take over a particularly large force that you know you outnumber without having to do a number of conquests. Or maybe if you've already invaded a kingdom, or you don't have enough to do, say, a duchy war, you can just do the subjugation here through the prestige that you're already getting because you're tribal, and take over the territory quite quickly. I really, really like subjugate. I've used it before in my Novgorod campaign, and it was a lot of fun. I didn't really realize how potent it could be. Now, it is worth noting that right now, our vassal system, we only have tribal vassals, but if you were to have any feudal, clan, or republic vassals, they automatically have a negative 20 opinion of you. So you do have to be careful of the kind of vassals that you do take in as tribal. And also, your vassal contribution changes depending upon your level of fame. So right now we're established. Established is the very bottom end of the ladder, with the top one being the living legend. So with each level of progression of fame, you get 10% more taxes contributed and 20% levies. So let's take a look here. He's giving me 10%. Disgraced, I believe, is the one below this. And I think that they still give you, they give you 0% at that level. So as you progress up from established to living legend, you'll go up 10% taxes and 20% levies to a max of 50% taxes and 100% levies at max. Now, this is why when you're playing a tribal realm, you have such a disgusting amount of levies, because you're able to pull 100% of the levies that this vassal has. This is the only type of government that allows you to do that. Everyone else has a pretty good percentage that they'll allow you to do, 35, 45, and it just depends on if you're a clan or you're feudal. So keep this in mind when you're playing tribal. You're strong because you've got this, this immediate kind of onslaught of levies from having a high prestige score. And I will say that will give you a lot of levies, but not necessarily a ton of men-at-arms, because your men-at-arms are going to be limited by your buildings and other factors. So that brings us into holdings. Your holdings are limited. This is a tribal holding. I can make specific buildings, which require both gold and prestige, but that's it. I can't make a new holding here. I can't make a castle, I can't make a city, I can't make a bishopric or anything of the sort, because that is not how tribal holdings work. There's one holding to rule them all, as it were. So each individual county only gets one holding in it. So until you progress to feudal, you have to build up these individual building slots and the hold itself up to, you know, fortified tribal hold, and then you can get a little bit more here and there. But in order to get more men-at-arms and higher quality armies, you need to be a feudal government, which allows you to have access to those higher men-at-arms. So before we close this section out real quick, a lot of people are struggling with this, and I'm going to make a full-on video on the subject matter, but every single tribal faction will have this. Where is it? Adopt feudal ways. There we go. And a number of parameters are set before you. You have to have absolute tribal authority, which is pretty cut and dry. You have to organize your faith or be a part of an organized faith. You have to have level 2 of fame, development level 10, and tribal era innovations. So a lot of these are pretty self-explanatory as far as, you know, okay, your fame, your tribal authority. Development, I think, is also pretty easy to understand. But these two, the organized faith and the tribal innovations, if you are particularly hurting in this arena, tribal innovations can be increased very quickly by going down a lifestyle that focuses on scholarship. This will allow you to get more learning skill, and it will increase your innovations. And hopefully being the head of a culture, like we are right now, will allow you to progress through your remaining innovations quickly so you can become feudal. But lastly, about this, about reforming your religion. Let's click this religion tab. Let's go to the bottom here where it says reform this religion. And here's how you do it. You need all this level of piety, so on and so forth. Well, at the time, a lot of quote-unquote pagan or tribal personalities, factions would convert to Catholicism. That was a way for them to consolidate power during the medieval or the Middle Ages. So if you want to quickly do that, I switched over to Prussia because they are geographically close to Poland here. As long as you're sharing a border with this religion, it's easier to convert. So take Catholic, for example, here. We'll click it, go to convert faith, and we could do it right now. And if I do that, I'm going to take whoever I take with me. We also get, of course, this guy jumps in here. But jumping back to decisions and adopt a feudal way, we now have this taken care of. Catholicism is an organized faith. So if you're struggling with the faith portion and organizing your faith, which is a super awesome RP way to approach adopting a feudal way as a tribal faction, you can just simply deal with it easily by converting to Catholicism or by converting to Orthodox Christianity or Muslim. It doesn't matter, or Islam for that matter. It doesn't matter. As long as it's an organized religion, you can convert to it and kind of circumvent the process of doing it on your own. But now that we've gone over clan and tribal, let's close our video out and talk about some feudal governments. And to do this, we'll be jumping over to my favorite part of the map, Apulia. So the feudal government system is very interesting because it's kind of, I feel like, where the game always wants to push you when you're in the tribal stage, obviously, because there's that option to do it in the decisions. But when we jump over here to our realm, we see a number of things. Some things that we've already seen with our clan scenario. We have crown authority now, so this is the same thing as it was for crown. As you push up these limited high crown and absolute crown authority laws, you get the ability to get certain things from your vassals, and certain things such as vassals cannot wage any war unless they use a hook on their liege. Certain things that kind of are placed in to kind of maintain a little bit more stability in your realm. Now, these are, of course, gated by stuff like royal prerogative, which the Normans have by default, or stuff like divine right, which gives you special feudal contracts, scutage, which I think I just totally butchered, which also gives you special feudal contracts, but you need to have certain innovations to get certain crown authorities in the feudal system. In addition to that, the feudal system also has a very interesting thing. It's called the feudal contract. And this goes over the obligations and rights that a vassal has to you as their liege. And depending upon your position to the vassal and whether or not you're their rightful liege, you have a certain level of taxes and levies that the vassals give to you as a result of their feudal contract. So taking a look over here, and before we actually dive into this, it's worth noting that rightful liege will give you a different penalty. So let me hover over taxes, for example, and then over contribution. So at this level, since I am a duke and count is right below duke, there's only a 50%, there's a 50% penalty on the amount of contribution of taxes and levies. If I was a king and this was still a count, it would be 25% instead. And if I were an emperor, and this were a duke, I would actually be exempt from this penalty. So the level of separation dictates how much of a penalty you receive from the not rightful liege scenario. So that's worth keeping in mind. So when we take a look at the feudal contract, we're going to look at Count Joffrey here because we are his rightful liege, so we won't have any penalties when I talk about some of these things. And you might remember this from the tutorial, but it's worth going over real quick. So exempt, you get 0 taxes from this vassal, and this will progress up from 0 to 2.5 to 10% to 15%, then at the top end, 25%. And it's the same thing here with levies. You're going to go 0, 10%, 25%, 35%, and then lastly, of course, 50%. So you don't get to that coveted 100% that you get with tribal systems, but still you get up to 50% of the available levies from your vassal. Now, in addition to the obligations from the feudal contract, which is this right here, you have the rights system. Now the rights, these basically are things that you are giving to your vassal in exchange for something or another. Coinage, for example, the liege, myself, will have development growth of -2% a month, but the vassal development growth in realm capital is increased by 0.3 a month. So if you have very high development, maybe you go ahead and do this and it increases the development in your vassals' counties, and that will increase their amount of taxes and levies that they will then give back to you. So that's when you would use coinage. But you can also have stuff too, like forced partition. This makes it so that your vassal now has to have the partition succession laws. So some of these seem pretty terrible, but also some of them can be very good. For example, council rights. The vassal is guaranteed a position on your council, or protected. Your liege cannot revoke the vassal's title. War declaration allows it so that the vassal himself can go and declare wars as he sees fit without having to basically ask the liege, more or less. So how you really manipulate this is by taking a look at the hook system, which the tutorial goes over. But let's say if I want to increase the taxes and the levies on this vassal of mine, on Count Joffrey. Well, it says that this is an act of tyranny and subjects are going to lose 40 opinion of you. And it's 20 opinion per tyrannical, quote unquote, decision in increasing one of their obligations. Decreasing it, That's not going to cause an issue. In fact, it's going to help out with the opinion that's going to fluctuate from the increase in an obligation. But going back to this, you can offset this by, of course, using a hook. But let's say, you know, Count Joffrey, he's a good guy. He likes me a lot. I'm going to protect his title. I'm never going to take it away from him. Well, you see that? Now we're at 20 opinion being lost because we just negated one of the negative things of increasing his obligations by granting him a right. Well, you know what? He's also got a pretty strong army, so I'm going to sanction his wars. Now, we can do this situation and we don't have to really worry about the feudal or the ramifications of a tyrannical feudal contract change. So that is worth noting. I think it might be an issue here. You cannot propose more than 3 changes at once. So that, I just want to kind of show you that these things the rights that you grant can wipe out the tyrannical gains that you incur from increasing your obligations. And it is one of the biggest portions of having a feudal system is dealing with the feudal contract. If one of your vassals has a hook on you, they're going to use that to decrease their obligations. So maybe he has a hook on me. He goes, you know what? I want more of my levies. I'm going to force this through. So giving a hook to your vassals isn't always the best way to go about things because obviously they can use that to, well, get lower taxes or lower levies or just becoming exempt from it entirely. Now, there is, of course, the special contract system. Now, if we jump over here to the cultures once more, and I go over into the high medieval system, or I'm sorry, innovations, we can see that this gives us Palatinate. Or if we look at this one, Scutage will give us the Scutage feudal contract. So there are some additional feudal contracts that you can actually get from your innovations that you will be probably needing anyway for your crown authority. So it is worth kind of talking about those things. Now, as far as other things on how they operate in a feudal system, it's going to be very similar to a clan system, especially with the holdings. Now, it is worth noting that your opinion, the vassal's opinion of you might not outright matter in the sense that it will directly reduce the amount of levies and taxes that they give, because as we've talked about, that is dictated by their feudal contract. Remember, with the tribal system, it's dictated by your level of fame, and by your clan system, it's dictated by their opinion of you. The feudal contract locks them into an obligated amount of levies and taxes, damn their opinion of you. And with that, I think it's worth noting that, let's see, looks like in this is the very beginning of the campaign. I just pressed a new one to kind of take a look at this. As you grow your territory, you're going to deal with the situation of a powerful vassal requires a position or wants a position on council. And when you deal with those situations, you can have your vassals, you can sway them, you can offer them gifts, you can modify their feudal contracts, that will sometimes help them. You can offer them ward or guardianship to help out with your with your opinion of them. And that will help deal with this situation. You can also have your chancellor go to domestic affairs. That will increase the direct vassal opinion of all of your other vassals. And I'm going over this because a number of people have told me, like, hey, how do I deal when I have all these vassals and they want a position on my council and I only am relegated to, if you're Catholic or someone who has a set dictated head, what do I do if I have these 4 slots pretty much already taken? Well, you navigate around that by doing the game of intrigue, right? Doing the sway game, doing the befriend if you have that option open to you from lifestyle, by doing the wards and the guardianships situation, or getting a hook on them so they cannot do anything against you using intrigue. So that's the way you really navigate around having to deal with those council positions and having a large amount of vassals, because you will have that position as you increase in your feudal territories. Speaking of, let's go down into the holding section. So this is going to play very similar, if not exactly the same, to clans. Now you're going to have your individual holdings that you're going to build. Now the difference here being, of course, that you yourself can only hold a castle holding. When I take a look at my domain, I'm only going to see castles as part of my direct and immediate domain. This menu right here. Your cities, as I click 5 different menus, your cities will all be held by a mayor, and your bishoprics will be held by a bishop, and they will then contribute taxes to you. And it's important too to note that with development it will be increasing your levies, your taxes, and your supply limit, just like it would for clans. And your control will also help out in that, as we've covered in our overview of how counties and managing your domains work. So when we take a look at the feudal system, we get one that's a very different one, right? We have holdings, whereas the tribal system does not. And we have development that increases our supply, our taxes, and our levies, where tribal does not. And it's important to know these things because you also have to look at your succession. Now, succession is going to be done in the way that I'm sure a lot of people are pretty used to by now. You're going to push through the multiple heirs scenario until you get to primogeniture, unlocked by an innovation. The primogeniture innovation. So you don't get any special casus belli either, though, unfortunately. So if I want to go to war with someone, I have to have some sort of de jure title or claim to their title. Let me see here if I click on this person, or a holy war. A holy war is the closest you get to the conquest casus belli of the previous two governmental systems that we talked about. And you're really going to be spending a lot of time trying to get those claims, either by using claimants, which you can do by inviting them to your realm, or having the claim as part of a de jure title, such as this. Okay, I've got the Kingdom of Sicily, so I now have the de jure title or claim to all these lands outside of my realm, or fabricating those claims using your bishop. So it is a little bit slower of a process, and the feudal system is bogged down by a number of things too, like when you look at military, creating men-at-arms, you have to do with money. But you can actually maintain a higher amount of men-at-arms because you can increase those so much more over time. So while the tribal system allows you to have these massive armies with a 100% contribution of levies, and the clan system allows you to really pull out a ton of taxation and the ability to move your crown authority pretty easily through the ranks as long as you have the proper innovations, the feudal system guarantees you money and it guarantees you levies despite all of your other standings with your vassals or your actual prestige or anything like that. And it's a very dependable governmental system by comparison to the other two. They all have their strengths and their weaknesses. I will definitely say that. But I wanted to be able to give you guys this quick overview of each one of the governmental systems so you can better understand how they work in Crusader Kings 3. The continuation of this video, we're going to be doing a guide on how to progress from tribal to feudal, kind of going over some of those things I mentioned in the feudal section. So hopefully this gives you a better idea of how the governments work in Crusader Kings 3. If you have any other questions or you are struggling understanding some of the things that I talked about, go ahead and leave a comment below. I will answer it as fast as I can, or when I do see it. And other people in the community might be able to jump on it as well. But as always, thank you so much for watching here today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment below, all that kind of fun action. But have a good one and take care.